here with Bob Streit from Ames, Iowa, in Beijing, China, at the International GMO Conference. Bob, can you tell us your title, your background, and what you spoke about at the conference?
Okay, name is Bob Streit. Live just outside Ames, Iowa, near a small town called Boone. Also, I work as an independent ag consultant, working mostly in the Midwest, but also get down to South America pretty regularly, and then work a little bit off both coasts, primarily corn and soybeans, but also getting into quite a few other grain and horticultural crops. So what myself and some colleagues have been seeing, and what my talk was about, is the maybe the plant health, the crop situation that we've been seeing the last few years in the Midwest after different pesticides, primarily glyphosate, have been used on them. And what we've been seeing strongly since 2008 and 2009 is a major decline in plant health. And at first we were somewhat mystified what was happening. Now, in our work in South America on the USDA Rust Task Force, we got quite knowledgeable about fungicides, how they were used, how they were formulated, and physiology in the plant.
Okay, so rust is a type of fungus or something that happens to the crop?
Yeah, it's a fungus that is probably the most virulent I've ever seen. It showed up in South America in 2003 for the first time. And it went in and it probably killed completely 12 to 15 million acres of crop.
That's a huge crop loss.
Yeah, and it's bad enough that there are places where they will spray their crops 13 times in one season to kill it, and that's a crop that's only in the ground maybe 99 to 110 days.
And this is a crop that is sprayed 13 times with a pesticide that we ingest because it doesn't wash off. Is that correct?
Well, they usually dissipate, but the thing is the disease is that severe that along with their weather conditions is just very conducive to its growth. Now, likewise, what we're seeing here and what the conference was about were the animal, plant, and human health ramifications of maybe those residues being present in the food that we eat. Because the problem, as we recognize it, is a lot of farmers raise their grain, they raise their crops, and they think you take it to the elevator and sell it, they get rid of it. People producing pork crops that take it to farmers market have a greater connection with the consumers. Most farmers in the Midwest that raise grain really don't have that connection, and they don't stop to think about what the health of their consumers is. So really why this is taking place in China is they really had a closed society until about 15 or 20 years ago. And then they started importing a lot of grain from different countries. And what they're noticing is a huge and dramatic decline in human health. We just talked to the organizer of the conference, and they said they've got roughly 100,000 people a year, young to middle age, that just drop over dead. In schools, in the army, in business life, and they're really asking why this is going on. We learned at the conference they've got roughly 350 million people being diagnosed per year with cancer over here. Again, they're asking why, and because the Army still has a lot of power here, and they're organized, quite a few of the people that were at the conference are actually among the generals in the Army. They're accepting their role in trying to protect the health of their inhabitants. As a result, maybe the people in the countries that are producing the food also that have similar problems, but yet either through their social structure or maybe inattention by the country's leaders, or the fact that there's too much money involved, they don't want to maybe take corrective action.
Now, we have to point out that the Chinese have declared that their army and military are going to be fed non-GMO food. So they are taking action.
Yeah, huge action, which is very good.
Yeah.
But I'd say the country's leaders, the business leaders, and I'd say the social leaders in the U.S., in South America, and Europe, I think have to recognize that China is doing this because the Chinese market, and I'd say in part the Russian market, are also huge consumers. And too often in agriculture we forget number one rule in business, and that is the customer is right. You have to meet his demands.
Yeah.
And if there is an alternative supplier, that will meet those demands, that's where the business is going to go to.
Yeah, and the fact is that we want our children healthy, we want our citizens healthy, we want our military healthy. We don't want all the sickness, and what you're seeing in the plants is that the plants are becoming more susceptible to fungus and illness and weakness as well, and you're seeing it correlate with human health. Is that correct?
Yeah, what I showed during my presentation, one of the things I like flying during the summer in friends' airplanes. I went up several times per year during the 2009 through 2013 seasons. Took a camera with me, and anyhow, we shot pictures, and just sea to shining sea or horizon to horizon, we saw sick crops. And we think what was causing the problem was either a fungus mixed with a new entity, or a bacteria mixed with a new entity that made the disease much more virulent, much more aggressive. And anyone that consumed grain from those fields was infected with this problematic causal organism.
That's alarming.
So really, I guess when I've given agricultural talks the last few years, I've said the one person that some of these large companies do not want to tick off and wake up are the mothers and the Chinese.
Yeah.
So here we are visiting with the lady from San Diego in Beijing. So those two things have happened.
Moms across America in Beijing, we are waking some people up, and with the help of farmers and specialists and experts like yourself, courageously sharing your findings, sharing the truth, and sharing the reality of what's happening, the impact of GMOs and glyphosate. We moms are incredibly empowered, and we really thank you for your dedication. I know it's not easy, and the contribution that you're making to the world.
We appreciate the opportunity to be here and discuss this.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Here in Beijing, China, with Mae-Wan. Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. And Mae-Wan, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I have a PhD. I'm Mae-Won Ho, Director of Science and Society, Director of the Institute of Science and Society. We also publish a magazine called Science and Society. And in this conference, what I talked about was the hazards of GMO and where they actually come from. Because, the problem with the artificial genetic modification is that it is inspired by a view of genetics that thinks that genes determine organisms in a very straightforward, deterministic way. And unfortunately, that's all wrong. It doesn't match up with reality.
Okay, and so this is based on data from how old was that?
It's based on kind of pre-1970s.
Oh, that old.
Exactly. It's completely obsolete. And since the mid-1970s, genetics has been turned upside down because we now know that the entire genome is fluid and dynamic. And it's always the genes, the DNA, RNA, proteins are always talking to each other and talking to the environment. And so there's a lot of feedback from the environment that changes the genes, changes the so-called genetic information in the tissues and cells. And so what this means is that that organisms are always doing natural genetic modification in real time. And the modified genetic information is passed on to subsequent generations. But you see, the difference is that the natural process is extremely precise, completely, precisely targeted.
And it's appropriate to its environment, is what I understood.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's completely context dependent.
Okay.
And it doesn't interfere with anything else that's happening at the time. In fact, everything is going on. It's like a really completely choreographed dance.
So it's like an animal that develops a certain type of camouflage because of the environment that it lives in. That's natural.
Well, that is natural,
yes.
And that is, and at the molecular level, everything, millions of molecules are always working together at any one time in a cell. But these are all completely choreographed.
Right.
and very precise.
But GMOs are not.
Of course not. You know, GMO is basically based on overcoming the natural process and interfere with the natural process. This is why it can cause all kinds of hazards. I mean, it's really, really dangerous.
Because then the rest of the organism needs to sort of protect itself, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the thing is, you see, now there is no doubt that GM feed and exposures to GMOs is dangerous. Because if you've got independent scientists, scientific information, scientists in the lab, kind of really corroborating everything that the farmers have been observing in their fields, you know, animals dying of all kinds of horrible illnesses.
And
so
the mothers have been observing with their children and in the classrooms.
Absolutely, but we have been hearing nothing because they've been like, so all this information has been suppressed from the mainstream, from everybody. We've been kept in the dark.
Yeah.
So this conference was a real eye-opener. Everything came together. The farmers that were here, the scientists were here, the consumers, everyone, mothers like yourself. I mean, mothers are the most important. I think what you're doing is extremely important, and I'm glad you told all the mothers present at the conference to do the same.
Yeah.
Just ban GMOs from your home in the first instance. Don't give it. I mean, it's cruel to give it to your children under such circumstances. You know, this has been a real eye opener for everybody, and I'm sure that this whole movement is going to be unstoppable.
That's right, unstoppable. Thank you so much, Mae-Wan, for such a brilliant scientist as yourself. To see that this conference made such a big impact is truly significant. And your contribution was unique, it was specific, and it was a huge part of why this conference is a success. So thank you so much for your tireless work and your commitment.
And thank you for your work.
Thank you. We're here with Peter Saunders in Beijing, China, at the International GMO Conference in 2014. And Peter, can you tell us a little bit about your background and why you spoke today at the conference?
Well, I'm originally a mathematician, but I got interested in mathematical biology and then in biology. And then when you're interested in things like that, you find yourself looking at GM because it's a big issue. And the more you learn about GM, or at least the more I learned about GM, the more worried I became. And I couldn't understand why other people weren't. And so I found myself campaigning, which was not actually what I meant to do. But there you are.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about your organization and this great new website that you have?
Well, I'm one of the directors of ISIS, the Institute of Science and Society. And our idea is to apply science to social problems, by which I mean that when we look at something like GM or nuclear energy or something like that, if we're going to be against things, and we sometimes are, we want to be against them for scientific reasons. We want to say, look, it's not a case that we don't like science. We do like science. We love science. But we love good science. And if you're going to look at, say, GM, you want to look at the science of it. And if you do, you get pretty frightened.
Yeah. And so what is your website? Can you tell us a little bit the name of your website and what do you do?
If you look at our website, you'll see that we cover a great many things. The website we use for general things is www.i-sis.org.uk. The hyphen is because someone else got the ISIS name first, and so we were stuck with that. And that covers general things, and if you look on it, you can find, we think, good science on a wide range of topics that I hope most people are interested in.
And can you tell us about Spark?
Well, we set up Spark just recently. Spark, by the way, is spelled with a C, not a K.
So it's sparc.com?
No, it's thespark.net.
Okay.
And we set it up because what we've discovered was that if you look in the scientific literature and all the journals and the articles and so on, you find that there's actually an awful lot of evidence about GMOs and other things for that matter, which is really pretty damning in the sense that it really tells you in good scientific language, in good scientific papers, what the dangers are and how bad things are. problem is it's rather hard to find because it isn't covered very much by the papers, it isn't covered by the big journals. And so after you've been in the game for 10 or 20 years, you know where to look and you can find a lot of it, but not everybody has been. So what we decided was needed was a website where people can just go and they can look up and they will find that there will be an abstract and a link. And if you want to read an article to find out about something about the chemistry of GMOs, something about the problems that farmers are having with GMOs, something about the health problems with GMOs, and this is scientific work, that's where you will look for it.
Excellent. We are very excited. I see in the future perhaps a campaign where moms can tell our media to go to Spark, thespark.net, and to see the actual scientific studies proving that there's harm from GMOs and glyphosate, and so that they can see the studies for themselves.
That's very much one of the things that we're hoping. In fact, it was very interesting what happened once. There is in England a sort of soap opera based in a country town. It's called The Archers. And they did a few episodes on GMOs once. We were involved in that, helping them out. And it was very interesting because what happened was that moms and others in England were able to go to their member of parliament or something or whatever, and they didn't have to be scientists themselves. All they had to say was, look, we heard this on The Archers, is it true? And since people couldn't deny it was true, this was very strong. I think that's actually very important. You don't have to be a scientist to ask your representative awkward questions. Just say, look, I read it here, is it true? And if it isn't true, tell me why not. And you'll stump them.
Fantastic point. I think inquiry and curiosity is going to help save the world. And you are providing an opportunity for people to not just find out more information, but to allow that information to ask, to invoke further inquiry even.
Yes, we're very much hope that so.
Yes.
We depend upon people like the moms to do it. Because what made the GM thing really important at the time was not that we said there was a problem, it was that all sorts of, well, in England it would be little old ladies, powerful group of people, I may say.
Yes.
When they start asking questions, they have to be answered because they're important.
Yes, the moms and the grandmoms and people who feed others.
Exactly.
Right? Thank you so much, Peter Saunders, for your extraordinary contribution to our movement, our cause, and to the world.
Thank you.
DeFarge in Beijing, China, and Nicola is from France, and you are on the Serelini team, is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So I worked on the famous rat feeding study that had a long story and that was just republished a few months ago, together with its raw data, so that everybody can read it and even analyze our data. And we show on what concerns you directly, I mean low level exposure to glyphosate, that our lowest dose was 0.1 ppb. I mean it is 1 drop of Roundup within 10 billion drops of water.
Wow, so 1 drop out of 10 billion drops of water of glyphosate was in the water that you fed rats.
Exactly. So it is a level that is nearly 15 or 20 times above what you found in your son's urine.
Right, lower, do you mean? Lower than?
Lower,
15 to 20 times lower than the 8.7 parts per billion that I found in my son's urine.
So in our, it is a level that is allowed in the tap water and that is regularly found. And we found 2.5 more mammary tumors in female rats. This was associated with a dysfunction of pituitary. I mean that there was an impairment of the sex hormones. And you know how important is this balance of sex hormone, even before puberty. So we have strong concerns, and also we found that we had increased problems in the liver and kidneys. In fact, these are the detoxifying organs that help us protect us against chemicals, for example. So all these organs were reached statistically significant. I am a scientist.
Yes.
So, sorry, and with this very, very low level, which is an authorized level.
Authorized level. That's what's so important. The European Union and the EPA in the United States allow this level.
Yes, they tell you that this level are safe. Why? Because they did their safety experiments only with glyphosate alone. But in fact, in the pesticide, as it is sold and used, you have adjuvants to make the principle active. So, in fact, you should test Roundup, because this is what is used. This was never done. We are the only study that tested this commercial formulation with blood analysis of rats.
Okay, so what's important,
EPA,
yeah.
give us the raw data that leads you to authorize Roundup and these levels in the water. They will tell you, we have a lot of data on glyphosate, but yes, do you have for Roundup? They will tell you, we have no blood sample of rats fed with Roundup.
This is very important. We need to understand, because we've been talking about glyphosate,
Yes.
and moms have also been asking to recall Roundup. But what's important to note is that the studies have all been tests done just on glyphosate.
Exactly.
And what you're saying is that Roundup is a combination of chemicals which have never been tested for safety other than your study is what
Yes.
you're showing. And you're showing severe toxicity, liver damage, and sex hormone damage
Exactly.
from Roundup, which glyphosate is the chemical, the active chemical ingredient, but there are
Plants, only on plants.
on plants,
Not
right?
on humans.
But there are inerts, there are other chemicals that are in Roundup which increase the toxicity of
Yes.
glyphosate, is what
Up
we're
to
seeing.
1,000 times.
1,000 times more.
Yes, yes.
And this Roundup is what we spray in our food as a drying agent.
Yes, exactly. So you see the concern. So ask
Yes.
EPA to have the raw data. You will
So
see
ask the
it's just
EPA for the
not-
raw data. Yeah,
Yes.
so they don't have the raw data on tests done on Roundup.
With Roundup, it was not done.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nicolas, for your studies and for your continued courage and your commitment. Please give Serelini and the entire team an American hug from the moms, and keep going with your research, and we will continue to share it.
Keep going.
Okay, thank you. We're here with Vandana Shiva in Beijing, China for the International GMO Conference. Vandana, it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you for coming all this way. Can you tell us briefly what you spoke about at the conference this weekend?
Well, at the conference I talked about the fact that there is really a knowledge war, a genetic war, a food war underway. And it's not just a metaphorical war, it is a real war, because it is assaulting the health of plants, soil, animals, and of human beings. And just as other wars must end, this one must end too, and it can only depend on people's energies, people's commitment to speak the truth, good science, real science, not the so-called sound science, which is pseudoscience, as was addressed by many speakers. The other thing I talked about was how a desperate industry based on false science and therefore failed technologies, but huge hazards, is now using big money to attack the few of us who dare to speak the truth for the well-being of the planet and people. And that's why I have this proposal that next year, from Mother Earth Day, which is 22nd of April, to 10th of May, which is Mother's Day, we celebrate life. We celebrate the defense of life, which is fierce love.
Yes.
Love that is so dedicated to our children and to the earth that it will not ever say, no, I cannot do anymore. Once you've changed nappies at night, you don't say the next nappy I will not change. You just get up and do the work that it takes to be mother. We have to express our gratitude to the earth, who is our mother. But most importantly, one of the things that this conference showed us was there's an intimate connection between the health of the soil, the health of plants, and our own health. And there's an intimate relationship between diseased soils because of chemicals and GMOs, diseased plants, and diseases in human beings, especially our children. Our children deserve better. We will make sure they have a better future by working together. So I hope everyone across the world will join in those days where we articulate both our love as well as our resistance.
Wonderful. We're really looking forward to it. Next April 22nd to May 10th, moms around the world, women around the world, people who feed people around the world to join together and express that we want healthy soil and healthy plants and healthy people. Vandana, thank you as always for your courage and your tenacity and your wisdom and your commitment. Thank you so much.